welcome once again to Caleb Likes Books. Today I have another book review for you, and that is for Percy Jackson and the Olympians, The Battle of the Labyrinth by Rick Riordan. This is book 4 in the Percy Jackson series. I've been going through this series over the last several months, and have been enjoying it. It's not like one of my favorite series or anything, but it's one that I enjoy reading here and there, and it's one that I've had a decent amount of fun with. Overall, the series so far has not been like amazingly awesome or anything for me so far, but it's just been a fun, entertaining, quick, pretty quick reads that I just enjoyed, and not much more than that really. And that trend pretty much continues with this book. I am afraid that I'm not going to have a huge amount to say in this book. There are some things about this one specifically that I do think I can talk about. But my general thoughts on this are, if you enjoyed the first few Percy Jackson books, you'll probably enjoy this one because it kind of continues a lot of the same things that are found in those first few books. So as far as good stuff with this book, I do enjoy some of the character stuff in this book. I think especially the way that the characters are utilized. In the first few books, the main characters of each book were kind of different characters. You'd have some combination of, Percy and Annabeth and Grover and a couple of the other characters. I think those are the main three of the first book. But then you brought in others like Tyson, I believe, is one of them, and a few other characters. And it would be like a different trio each book. Whereas in this one, they all kind of come together a little more, which I did enjoy, seeing all these different characters interact with one another that we hadn't really seen. Like, you might have seen a little bit of in the past books. Seeing like characters like Tyson and Grover interacting pretty extensively, I think didn't really come into play much until this book, for example. You saw a little bit of that in past books, but then you really see it much more in this one, and stuff like that was fun. I also did enjoy the slightly darker tone this book had. I feel like this is probably the darkest out of the series so far. I think that, the second book was a little darker than the first one. The third one was probably about the same in my mind. This one kind of makes it even more dark in some ways, which I did enjoy. Kind of has that feeling of maturing and getting a little bit more serious along with the characters aging and things like that, which is something similar to what other books like something like Harry Potter or something like that, which I did enjoy. And I think the action in here was good too. I did enjoy the action in this book, and the mythological elements, as always, were enjoyable. The voice of Percy was good in this book. I feel like it wasn't, to me, as funny as past books were, but I still enjoy reading from Percy's perspective. I think he has an entertaining point of view. Of course, all these books are told first person from Percy's perspective. It's a lot of P alliteration, but I enjoyed that quite a bit as well. And again, like I said, the mythological elements and things like that were good. And another thing that I did like about this book was that it feels like it's really building to something. The first few books in the series, like, there are hints of things to come, but to me, the first few books all felt pretty well standalone. Like, obviously, it's a series that's building, each book, adding character development or more about the plot and the way, foreshadowing and things like, with Percy kind of being this chosen one type character, you kind of get more of that as a series goes along. But to me, they all felt pretty separate in a lot of ways. This one, it feels like, things are finally starting to kind of come together and kind of build up towards the main, conclusion, being the 5th book, the next one. And that's also something that I did enjoy in this one. However, in terms of the negatives with this book, and kind of the reason why I feel like I don't have a huge amount to say about this book, even though it does, again, have some unique positives to it that I just talked about, I feel like this series at this point is starting, for me at least, to feel a little bit stale in some ways. Like, even though there's some unique things about this book that I do enjoy, it feels like it's just too much of the same for me. That in my experience anyway, is kind of the way that these kinds of series go. You don't want to do anything too drastically different or you know, change things up way too much like you might get in like an adult fantasy series or something like that. It just feels like, to me, more of the same, with just some slight variations, and each book in the series to me has felt like that. I didn't mind it as much in the first few books because I was still kind of getting into the series, and you know, they were still doing some fun things, and I think especially the humor helped for me, whereas this to me wasn't quite as humorous, whereas the past books in the series I thought were actually really funny in some places. But to me, it just feels like, again, more of the same, which is why I say if you enjoy the first few books of the series, you'll probably enjoy this one, because it is more of what works about this series, but to me, it doesn't do enough to be memorable in its own right. Like, I don't really remember the plot of this book that much. I don't remember a lot of the character interactions. I remember that, you know, again, the character interactions were there, and I liked that they were a little more varied this time around, because you had all the different characters interacting, rather than just a handful of them. But to me, this one just feels less memorable and interesting because it, again, is just kind of more of the same. And so for that reason, I found myself not enjoying it as much. You know, it's still a good book, and if you are a fan of the first few books and you are getting to be reading this one, I think you'll probably enjoy it if you enjoyed those books. But I do think that it's good to keep in mind that it is probably going to feel very samey at this point in the series, which now I'm kind of expecting that going into the next book. I'm hoping that it kind of does some interesting things, but that's kind of the way that I'm left feeling about this book, where even though there was some good stuff to it, it does just kind of feel like more Percy Jackson. And, you know, if you're really into Percy Jackson, that's probably a very good thing. For someone like me who's not like super into it, but I enjoy reading it now and then, but it's, you know, it's kind of just like a, you know, that was a good book kind of experience. You know, it's not going to leave a massive impression on me, so it's kind of the way I'm feeling about it, I suppose. So I would recommend this book, especially if you enjoy the other books in the series. For me, so far, and probably mostly because of this perception that I have about it kind of being more of the same, it is probably my least favorite of the series so far. I did find it the least memorable of them. I found it the least funny, which to me is a big part of this series. I found a lot of the character interactions were enjoyable, but not quite as memorable to me. Things like that. It just didn't quite land the same way as some of the other books did for me. So as far as a rating that I would give this book, I would give it like a 6.5 or a 7 out of 10. Like, it's a good book, but it's nothing that I absolutely loved or anything like that. You know, I don't want this review to come across as I'm like bashing it or anything like that, or I wouldn't recommend it, because again, if you're a fan of this series, I would recommend reading this. But just go in knowing that it's probably not going to be anything, you know, like I just felt like it was more of the same, like I said. So that's pretty much my basic thoughts on this book. So let me know in the comments if you have read Percy Jackson and the Battle of the Labyrinth, what you thought of it. If you kind of feel the same way about this book or the series in general, or things like that. I am looking forward to reading the fifth book, probably in a couple months or so. And so hopefully I enjoy that. So that is pretty much it for this video. So thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time.